Chapter 128 to 132. Form Realm. Once again in the immense white dimension. Broly sat in front of Gohan, who devoured a succulent feast in the same way his father would do, or rather, like his father if he hadn't eaten something decent for months. Well Gohan, you have passed the first test, you have survived for 9 months in my garden. I guess we can now move on to phase 2 of your training, Broly said, materializing a blackboard next to him. Tell me Gohan, before you start. Do you understand why I have made you survive for 9 months in a forest infested with wild prehistoric beasts that I call my little garden, with only a few survival books and a few help tools? Think and reason the answer carefully, Broly said, being an efficient and useful teacher who tries to make his student think and not memorize and nod like many others. And Gohan, who was still devouring a pig's leg as if they were going to take away his food, stopped momentarily, reflected and answered with not many doubts, was it for me to learn to live for myself and to become braver and stronger? Bingo! Very good Gohan, you have understood your initial situation and the final result after training. I congratulate you. We can say that you have been reborn after these 9 months, ha ha ha, you will understand this reference in future classes when I have the permission of your parents. Well, now is when your training and study really begin. If you had believed that until now this had been a hard training. Hee hee hee. You will laugh and cry equally, Broly said, as if he were an American Army colonel who trained rebel or useless recruits in 80s and 90s movies. Yes. Broly sensei. Gohan said without much encouragement and with some fear, although he didn't want or could express it, he was more hungry than afraid. Tell me Gohan, what is the best strategy to learn in the best possible way? Whether is martial arts, study, or anything, Broly asked, trying to make Gohan use his brain again. Striving hard, to try to learn from your own mistakes and other mistakes, and have a good teacher? Gohan asked, who remembered how much he struggled in the jungle, how he learned from his own mistakes, from the animals around him, from the books that Broly had left him and some of his occasional advices. Yes, that is very important, especially a good teacher, but being more general, the important thing is be as effective as possible, which includes the points you mentioned. And last but not least, is to be as efficient as possible. And now I'm going to show you the method to be as efficient as possible. Broly said, stating what the next task would be. And Gohan, who was looking at his sensei, who was sitting in front of him on a large sofa, for a moment he thought that he had vision problems due to the tiredness of his 9-month training, since he was seeing double. But when he scratched his eyes. Hey! What's going on? Are there two Broly Seni eyes? Gohan shouted upon see that his eyes had no problem. He wasn't seeing double. There were really 2 Brolys in front of him. This is one of the first techniques I developed, and the one I feel most proud. A skill that allows you to create up to 100 clones of yourself with which you share information in real time. The only drawback is that you have to divide your strength into equal parts, and that when you undo a clone the rest will receive the proportional damage that that clone has suffered. There is also the requirement to have a minimum of 100 fight level, which you already have thanks to your incredible talent and my guide. There is a more advanced version of this one that only works with scions, but you still don't meet the conditions, said the 2 Brolys, speaking simultaneously. Can I learn to do that too? Gohan asked, very impressed. He had never heard or seen anything like this were possible, and he also understood the usefulness of this ability. Oh. I have already understood it. In this way I can study several subjects at the same time. That's right, you've understood right away. I like it. It avoids me explaining everything with metaphors and redundant examples. It is a complicated technique that requires great control of the ki, so the following training will be to improve your energy control. Not only will it be useful for you to perform this skill, but also all others that you will learn later. Are you ready? Broly said, merging again with his other Broly and getting up to indicate that the moment of rest was over. And Gohan, getting up at the same time, bowed his head a little and asked sadly, and when can I see my mother? And study? She's going to get very angry if I don't do my homework. You will be able to see your mother at the moment in which you manage to perfectly master my body multiplication technique. At that time we will also start with your scientific/technological studies. So try hard, and let's surprise your mother. I am sure she will be very happy to see that you have grown up as a brave, strong and intelligent boy, said Broly, rubbing Gohan's head to comfort him, praise him and give him extra motivation in training. And Gohan, with a big smile and resolute determination, answered vigorously, yes Broly sensei. When do we start? Ha 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 ha. There is no hurry Gohan. In my dimensions, time passes in a very convenient way for training. But, we'll start right now. Broly said, giving him a book written by him about ki manipulation. Desire Rerun. Broly Mansion Movie Theater. I know that I would be a good father someday. I hope be one sooner than later. Ha 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 ha. Broly said, proud of his teachings and indoctrination work he was doing with the little Gohan while imagining such a future with his possible future children. I fear for the mental health of these children. Hagoromo said sarcastically and somewhat worried about the future. Ha ha ha. I will soon sculpt Gohan in my image and likeness. He won't be as powerful, intelligent and impressive as me, but, if he looks a little like me, he will have almost reached perfection in everything, said Broly, who was still in his own world, literally and figuratively. And now I fear for the mental health of that child even more. Hagoromo said again, who really feared for the possibility of seeing another Broly rising in the Omniverse. Kane House. Q. Is he coming back again? Asked Krillin, who could see a flying vehicle approaching the island. A few moments after Yajirobe left. I'm afraid it's not that. Said Broly, who kept looking at Bulma with complicity. Mutant Rashi-sama. Since they were Chi-Chi, Gohan's mother and Goku's wife, and his father Ox King, a former apprentice of Mutant Rashi. Oh no. It's Chi-Chi and the Ox King. Shout Mutant Rashi, who hoped to write a letter explaining the situation so as not to have to suffer the wrath of Chi-Chi face to face, which drove with a very aggressive attitude and face. Mutant Rashi-sama, what do we do? Asked Krillin, who didn't know how to deal with this situation. I still didn't write the letter, said Mutant Rashi, who also didn't know how to deal with this situation correctly. Don't worry, when I see that you don't know what to answer I will help you, said Broly, who was also prepared for this situation. In the same place seconds later. Mutant Rashi-sama. It's been such a long time. Have you been in good health? Said Ox King, bowing to his teacher in a very effusive way. Yes. I guess so. Mutant Rashi replied simply. And Chi-Chi, as an excessively worried and strict mother and wife, inspected the area in search of those who were late at home, either to force them to study or work. My Goku-san and Gohan's soul be over here. Where are they? WL, to tell you the truth. Broly-san. Mutant Rashi said, looking at Broly, since he didn't want to expose himself too much for cowardice, and since Broly had abducted Gohan to train him. Okay, Mutant Rashi-san. Don't worry about Gohan, miss. Right now he's studying under my direction, Broly said very formally, approaching Chi-Chi slowly and calmly. Studying under your direction? And, who are you? Chi-Chi asked, very surprised and stunned, since she didn't believe that someone in that house would help her study, and because she didn't know anything about that huge, muscular man with a third eye, and with an ape tail as well as her son and husband, in his childhood. Oh, excuse me for not introduce myself yet. I am Broly, a humble engineer, physicist, scientist, engineer, hacker, architect, interior decorator, artist, doctor, therapist of problematic adolescents, chef, magician, martial artist, the most powerful being born in this universe, lately also a film producer among many other things. And finally, I'm also your child's new teacher. Broly said, showing part of his curriculum to Chi-Chi. And while Bulma was surprised at Broly's incredible field of knowledge and Chi-Chi tried to assess whether that sack of suspicious muscles was as intelligent as he claimed to be and assimilate that he had called himself Gohan's teacher without him having given her approval. The martial artists like Krillin, Mutant Rashi, and Ox King still have their ears were still buzzing with some data that Broly provided. The most powerful being born in this universe? Does that seem humble to you? One moment, is that true? Shouted, Krillin, Mutant Rashi, and also Ox King, seeing his teacher's reaction, began to believe that this could be true. We'll talk later if you're really a teacher, if you're a competent teacher and if you are, or are going to be my child's teacher. For now I would like to know where my son is, Chi-Chi said a little calmer, knowing that at least they had worried about Gohan's studies. He is not here right now, he is studying in one of my laboratories acquiring theoretical and practical knowledge. I will take you in a moment so they can see him, so you can also appreciate the great study environment that I have prepared for him. But before that I have to tell you, miss, that your son is a true genius. Despite only being 4 years old, in less than a day I managed to make him acquire all the knowledge necessary to finish high school with honors. No doubt it is due to some incredible genes that carry great intelligence and the incredible education he has received so far, and I suspect quite reasonably that both things are due to his passionate and dedicated mother, Broly said, respectfully flattering Gohan for his great talent and character, exposing the almost impossible advances they had made today to show that he was a legendary teacher and to flatter Chi-Chi at the same time, thus creating a deadly combination that allows you to sell almost anything to her. Oh my. you have an eye for details, you're going to make me blush. Indeed, his high level of education and talent is due to me, Well, if Gohan really has learned so much and you are really such a good teacher, I don't see any problem in you being his teacher, Broly-san. Chi-Chi said, very flushed by the constant flattery towards her son and herself, so much that she had forgotten the anger she was carrying until now. Wow! He has a great way with words. He has dazzled her in no time. They thought Mutant Rashi, Krillin, Yumagame and Bulma, who admired how Broly calmed the ogre and put her on his side. And by the way, where is Goku? Is he with Gohan in those labs of yours? Asked Ox King, who also missed his son-in-law and also asked Broly. It was then when the atmosphere became tense and heavy, so much that none of those who knew the truth about Goku could even breathe. No, he is not in my laboratory, but I think it should be his venerable teacher who should answer that question, Broly replied, looking at Mutant Rashi in a very suspicious way, as if he wanted to avoid being the one to give a bad news. And in the same way that Broly did, Bulma, Krillin and Yumagame also looked at him, and moments later Chi-Chi and Ox King too, who began to suspect that something strange was happening with Goku. And Mutant Rashi upon see that everyone was looking at him, aw. You are talking about me, excuse me. He said, rubbing his head with a nervous smile and cold sweat, after looking around for another Goku's teachers behind him without success. Chi-Chi said, who looked at Mutant Roshi suspiciously, as if she were smelling that something strange was definitely happening with her husband. To tell the truth. He's dead, Mutant Rashi said dryly with funny voice as he continued to rub his bald head. What? Chi-Chi and King Ox shouted when they heard that extremely horrible and almost unthinkable news. Such was the shock that Chi-Chi turned blue and passed out. Chi-Chi! Stay with us. Her father shouted, trying to wake her up and give her some moral support. Hey old perv. Was so complicated? Do like Broly and build a leisurely dialogue in which she didn't get angry or fainted? At least you should have softened the blow. Is it so complicated to do the same? Especially when we have the Dragon Balls. Bulma shouted when she saw how extremely insensitive Mutant Rashi had been with this matter. Don't look at me like that. I had said I should write him a letter. I'm not good improvising, Mutant Rashi said helplessly before Bulma's glaring gaze. Desire Realm. On a random planet, one of the many that Broly had created in the Big Bang. Bomb. Bam. Clash. A green man with slug antennas and bruises all over his body flew from one place to another against his will, and stamped against several mountains, destroying them with every impact. Aw, fuck, damn bully, Piccolo shouted as he stood up once more to face the biggest monster he could ever imagine that existed in the universe. Come on Piccolo, you should be able to cancel my telekinesis using your own telekinesis and your ki, said Broly, who descended from the sky to the position of the injured Piccolo, whom he was going to heal for a new training session. Hey! When Goku's son will be at a level similar to mine to start training with him. It's not that I don't trust your methods, the results are obvious, but I still think you're soft with children's, said Piccolo, who was telling the truth on the one hand, but on the other hand what he wanted was to train with Gohan to be the one who gives and not the one who receives. Prom. And surprisingly Piccolo was thrown against another mountain, where he was embedded. It was obvious that Broly didn't agree with his comment. He has little left, since he is training in a place where time is even more generous than here, although first I have to do some small ploys to ensure everyone is happy, said Broly, who teleported again where Piccolo was to heal his old and new wounds. Form Realm. In one of Broly's new laboratories that he had prepared for Gohan and for this performance. Suddenly Broly appeared in a dazzling white room in the laboratory along with Bulma, Mutant Rashi, Krillin, Ox King and Chi-Chi, which had to be helped by her father to stand. Wow, this place is impressive, said Bulma, who understood at first glance how advanced the technology in that place is. Where is my little boy? Said Chi-Chi, who was desperately trying to see his little son, who had just lost his father. He's right there, miss, said Broly, pointing to a large glass wall, from which Gohan could be seen wearing a lab coat while taking his elementary extraterrestrial engineering course with a hologram-generated simulator. Aw! My Gohan! Chi-Chi shouted, which magically regained all his vitality and jumped from her father's big arm, throwing him to the ground in the process, and crossing the laboratory door at hypersonic speed. Gohan! My son! She screamed once more as she opened the laboratory door and pounced toward Gohan to hug him. Mom! MOM! Gohan shouted and cried too, corresponding to that hug. What a joy that you are well, and studying. My God, how big and strong you are now. I don't understand it, it's only been a few hours since you left home. Chi-Chi said, who kept hugging and kissing him, quickly realizing the changes in her beloved son. Notable changes, since he was in a place of desire realm where time flowed differently, in which he was 9 months and several months also in the form realm, where he advanced a lot in his studies thanks to the multiplication of bodies. Yes, that may be because I have been training hard for months, Aish. I said, studying hard. Only studying. I swear, Mama. Gohan said, who forgot what he had to say because of the joy of meeting his mother and the praise she had given him. And those suspicious words caused the overprotective and psychotic mother's switch to turn on in Chi-Chi with greater force than ever. Training? 4 months? What the hell are you? Zie Warudo. Meaning? What have I told you about fighting Anne? Yuich. Gohan. Chi-Chi shouted, bewildered to see that Gohan couldn't move, as if he had been frozen just like Bulma, Mutant Rashi, Krillin. I'm sorry, I've stopped time for Gohan. I don't think a little boy should hear that. And I don't think that others besides their family should know sensitive details about my pupil, said Broly, putting on a therapist gown. You have done what? Chi-Chi and King Ox shouted upon hear that such absurd skill exist. Time stop, I have quite a few strange abilities, Broly said, not giving importance to such an OP power. And after Chi-Chi had time to accept that Broly had the ability to stop time. What do you mean when you say a child shouldn't hear something? And what does that have to do with practicing martial arts for months? Chi-Chi shouted, distrusting Broly, his methods and intentions. This is to not open old wounds that have been so difficult to close. When I first met Gohan after his father's death, he was completely depressed, scared, and desolate. Not only had he lost his father, he also felt the only one guilty of his death. He kept repeating for days that if he hadn't been kidnapped his father would still be alive. He almost didn't want to eat, he didn't even dare to see his mother since he thought you would blame him for Goku's death. It was very sad to see him in this situation, it was as if there was no life in his innocent little eyes. Broly said, exposing a dramatic and sad scenario, mixing truths with lies to make it more convincing, acting in a masterful way. My Gohan. Chi-Chi said with great agony, since she felt that her heart froze when she imagined her little 4-year-old son in that state and situation. It hurt so much to imagine that she began to cry and tremble, so much that she began to suffocate. He lamented over and over again for being kidnapped and for not being able to do anything. Although he didn't know how to express or understand it with his 4-year boy kid, he hated feeling weak and helpless. That's why I tried to fight those bad thoughts, motivating him and make him gain self-confidence through martial arts. And here you have it, with my ability to manipulate time I was able to make him train, grow as a person and make him reflect until he could regain the joy and confidence of seeing that he had become stronger and braver. And of course as soon as he recovered we quickly began the study, as you can see. After all, a healthy soul can only be found in a healthy body and a healthy mind, Broly said, explaining the wonderful results that his training and knowledge of child psychology had had in Gohan. And Chi-Chi, who had been convinced both emotionally and logically, dried her tears and said with some difficulty, "Thank you, Broly. Thank you for helping my son. I am grateful for what you have done. Sorry for doubting you. You are undoubtedly a great teacher and I would love for Gohan to continue studying under your tutelage in the future. But could you defrost time? I want to talk to my little boy." Of course, Broly said, defrosting time. And except for Chi-Chi, everyone continued with what they were doing, which was, "Mama, don't get mad at him, he only..." Gohan said, who didn't want his mother to be angry at his Broly Senii because of him, but... Gohan, don't worry anymore. You don't have to try so hard. You are a wonderful boy and your father and I will always be proud of you. You don't have to force yourself to be strong. Your father, when he resuscitates, grandfather and I will always be here to protect you. Chi-Chi said while hugging the confused Gohan, who... No mother, I cannot depend on others forever, I have to become strong and intelligent as soon as possible to protect you and grandfather from all the evil guys that could try to harm you, said Gohan, who became very serious and said this to her mother, being the one who hugged her this time with great determination. Oh, my brainwash, my capacity to influence others has been very effective, there is barely a trace of the crying baby at the time, Broly thought, who was proud of Gohan and his change in attitude, but because of his narcissism he was more proud of his ability to cause that change. Gohan. Chi-Chi sighed, who saw absorbed how her son had matured in such a short time, something that made her proud, reassured, worried and sad at the same time. Gohan, I understand you, but I think you should go with your mother. Right now she needs you more than anyone, even more than you to yourself. As soon as you want and can come, I will come to pick you up, Broly said, kindly stroking the head of his pupil. And Gohan, who immediately understood what his teacher meant, took his mother by the hand and nodded. Sniff, sniff. What a touching scene, Krillin, Ox King and Bulma said when they saw the strange conclusion that had happened. He is also sensitive, considerate and good with children, thought Bulma, whose maternal instincts were beginning to flourish since she was nearly 30 years old. Well, I think it would be better for you to return you home. This place may be strange for you, Broly said, teleporting everyone, including Gohan again, to the Kame house. Form realm. At that time, in a room parallel to the laboratory, Broly and Gohan watched behind a television how everyone, included Broly and Gohan, teleported back to Universe 7. Are you sure it's okay not to tell Mom about those bad men, my new ability to multiply bodies, and that 99% of my bodies will continue studying and training here? Asked Gohan, who felt guilty for lying to his mother. It is neither good nor bad, it is simply the best thing we could do. You need to train for future battles without being disturbed, and your mother has lost her husband, she can't lose her son either. That's why a part of you has to stay with her and support her. But I don't think it's a good idea to add new worries like her son can multiply and he is training and studying at all times with me, Broly said, reasoning why lie to your mother is fine. Okay. Gohan said, who despite the logical reasoning felt bad for lying to her. Come on, lift that face, today we will begin serious combat training. You already master the ki, you have trained several practical techniques and you have the necessary knowledge. Now you need to learn how to apply them, and for that you need real fighting. Follow me, Broly said, pointing to Gohan that they should leave the laboratory. Form realm. Broly and Gohan were walking calmly towards the training area of the form realm, where someone was waiting impatiently. Hey Piccolo, we're sorry to make you wait a bit, but Gohan was hungry and we stopped to eat, Broly said, waving in a friendly and effusive manner. A bit? It took you 8 hours. Shouted Piccolo, who really had to wait a long time. He was very hungry. Well, from now on you will train together. Gohan, this green uncle who is almost always angry, is Piccolo, a friend of your father. He will be your training partner and also your second teacher. Broly said, introducing Piccolo to Gohan in a formal way. Friend of his father? Since when? Second teacher. Now you want me to train him in your place too? Piccolo shouted, who had been offended in multiple ways in no time. Come on Piccolo. If we speak in numerical terms, Gohan is now more or less at your level, but he still lacks experience and cleverness in combat, something that you can contribute. You both need a partner who is at the same level so that you can overcome yourself in an unforced way, so this is a win-win situation. But don't believe that I will not do anything. I will supervise you, I will heal, correct your mistakes, give advice, and sometimes you will fight against me. And I will reward you every time you pass an exam if your previous performance has been correct. I like the continuous evaluation system, said Broly, explaining the curriculum to his new 2 students. Exams? Will there also be tests for training? Gohan asked, who imagined himself sitting at a desk theoretically explaining how to fight. Exam? What kind of joke do you have prepared for us this time? Asked Piccolo, who was beginning to understand Broly's way of thinking and acting. Then Broly smiled and made something appear in the air, something that fell to the ground like a heavy sack of potatoes. Your test is to kill this waste in less than a week, and it has to be individually. You are close to him in power, you just need a little motivation. What? Piccolo and Gohan shouted, and rightly so, since the thing that fell to the ground was Raditz' body, which Broly held by the neck with his tail once again. What do you intend to do? Piccolo and Gohan asked, who felt that something bizarre, impressive and undesirable was about to happen. What? What? Happened, how can I? Oh! You! Raditz shouted, who was resurrected and therefore confused and angry to see that Piccolo was in front of him. The one who killed him, and Gohan the boy who had given him the header that started his defeat. Hey, Gohan shouted when he saw his evil uncle, for which he felt an instinctive fear. I can't believe it. He has resurrected him without Dragon Balls or other means. What the hell are you, Broly? Not even a god has a power like this. Piccolo said, dumbfounded, who more or less understood the categories of divine power and certain powers. And Broly, avoiding answering that complicated question, stopped time for Raditz and said, okay girls. You will have to kill that spit target in 2 weeks, in which I will not let you increase your level of power above 1.200. Raditz has a level of 1500 and as you are a team you will have to pass this exam both at the same time, so you better help each other. Otherwise you will suspend and you will not receive my valuable, precious reward. But you will receive my punishment. Wawa. And Broly's malevolently forced laughter, which became excessively sick, made Piccolo get goosebumps with every sound that his mouth emitted, especially because he looked at Piccolo in a rather threatening way, as if that punishment was only directed at him. Hey! Son of Goku! Piccolo shouted at Gohan very hurriedly, as if a great emergency was happening and only Gohan could help him. It's Gohan. Gohan said to indicate that he had his own name. And when he heard something he didn't want to hear and didn't care, Piccolo went into a rage. I don't care what your name is. You can now strive and follow my instructions to improve your martial arts or I swear that. But then he noticed a great pain in the head, as if someone had thrown a bowling ball at his head, and obviously that was Broly, who threw a small burst of energy against him. Lesson number 1, be nice to your partner, Broly said while pointing his finger at Piccolo. Aish, it will not be an easy task for Piccolo to become kind, venerable and child-loving, but I will get him to be. I am not the best self-proclaimed re-educator of troublesome teenagers in the Omniverse for any reason. Came house. A few hours later from Gohan's semi-change. Bulma and Broly sat side by side next to a last-generation computer created in the form realm, and behind them Mutant Rashi and Yumagame looked at the screen with great curiosity, and as if they were some stupid bumpkins that hadn't seen a video call in their life, they wanted to appear in that video call. Hello, little sister. Hello, Broly. Tights shouted with great euphoria as she greeted vigorously from the other side of the screen. Hello, Tights. Hello, Nay-san. Broly and Tights said enthusiastically too, but without exaggerations as Tights did. Oh, she's Bulma's sister. And she's pretty too, and she has a good pair of breasts just like her little sister Ho-Ho. Said Mutant Rashi, who stood between Broly and Bulma with a supreme level perverted face due to appreciate the newly discovered Tights. Oich. Ha 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 ha. Perverted action that had an immediate reaction translated in the form of a punch in the face, which in turn caused pain in Mutant Rashi, and a great laugh in Broly. Ha 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 ha, you have very funny friends, Tith said, not giving much importance to the perverted intervention of Mutant Rashi. Wow, what a surprise to see that the two of you have finally met, although I would have liked to introduce you myself, and also do it years before. But Broly always said he was very busy, although I think he was embarrassed hehehe. I think it's because at that time he was very short in his normal form, so he probably had a complex and didn't want to meet a beautiful and intelligent girl of his age until he grew up high. The feminine intuition of a hollow heads is scary, Broly thought, who was trying to make a poker face before Bulma's watchful stare that made him smile involuntarily, a smile that betrayed him, showing that Tights' assumption could be true. Normal form. Shorty? Asked Bulma, who occasionally looked at Broly sideways because of her sister's theory, and because she couldn't imagine that huge mass of muscles as a small adorable little boy. Well, the Scions have different transformation abilities that can alter our appearance and power apart from the transformation into a giant monkey, and we also have a very long childhood. You probably saw that with Goku, he surely was a dwarf one day and he became tall suddenly in a short time, Broly said, trying to answer Bulma's questions vaguely. Yes. And I also have pictures of the little boy of when we went on vacation. Do you want to see them? Tights said, showing photos of the trip in which, unlike those taught by Broly, also in these photos he wasn't transformed and was only with Tights. Oh no, well, it will be embarrassing, but this situation can also give me points, Broly thought, who knew how to take advantage of a bad situation, like someone showing pictures of your childhood to your crush. Oh, let me see. Bulma said excitedly when she saw a child Broly. These were all pictures of the intergalactic hotel that showed Broly and Tights eating, drinking, and having a great time alone. And although Bulma enjoyed seeing these photos and also Broly's embarrassed face, she began to feel a strange sensation upon seeing those photos and the interactions between Broly and her sister when they spoke. A sensation in her chest and awareness that made her feel uncomfortable and guilty. Feeling that she quickly recognized, and in doing so her head begun to be filled with a lot of doubts and contradictions. And to try to solve her doubts and contradictions, Bulma made the difficult effort to ask this. Nay-san. Broly, you. What kind of relationship do you have? I would define it as little big brother. Tights said quite thoughtfully as she held her cheek with the finger, as she used to do. I would define it as big little sister. Broly said to himself with a little serious face, meaning that although she was older than him, she was like a kind irresponsible little sister. And hearing both explanations somewhat strange and similar, Bulma understood that it was a strange situation of friendship where the oldest was the youngest and the youngest the oldest. Okay. I understood, it's a relief. Wait, I'm saying. No. 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 Calm down, Bulma. Okay, he is tall, handsome, dark, mysterious, strong, intelligent, kind with me, a bit rogue from time to time, funny and serious at the same time, charming, proactive, reliable, decisive, considerate, independent, knows how to cook like an angel, share hobbies with me like technology and science, thoughtful, responsible, good with children. Ah. He seems to be almost the perfect man. But you just know him. You don't know anything about him. You only know what he wants to show you and what your hollow head sisters has told you. What happens if all this is a facade and when you know him more it turns out that he is a great cretin? What if he is another irresponsible womanizer like Yamcha? Agsh. Yamcha. Why do I have to remember that cretin good for nothing now? Thought Bulma, having a great internal debate with his conscience and hormones. Ooh-hoo. As I anticipated, the jealousy and insecurity caused by the conversation with his sister and the photos shown are accelerating the coaxing process, but there is still much to do yet, Broly thought, who continued with his plan to make his waifu fall in love with him using a great advantage he had, which was to read her thoughts sometimes. What is a relief, Bulma-san? Broly asked treacherously to baffle Bulma. Bulma said involuntarily as she had just realized that she said that out loud, therefore she went into a state of panic and shame in which she became increasingly red. Shit. Come on, Bulma. Say something ingenious to get out of this embarrassing situation. Come on, you are an intelligent and mature woman. You are no longer a teenager who falls in love at first sight of the first gallon you meet. Calm down. Bulma continued with her internal debate. Ha 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 ha. It's nothing, it's just that. Ha 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 ha, you know, she is my older sister, and she is a bit careless sometimes and, ha 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 ha. I worry about her, ha 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 ha, Bulma said, shaking and flushing more every second, not knowing how to get out of that situation in which she was increasingly harmed and helpless. Good job, Bulma. Bulma thought sarcastically to herself. And Broly, seeing Bulma's reaction, he rubbed his hands mentally, hee hee hee. Now that the enemy is hurt, it's the best time to attack. Love is a war. Bulma, is something wrong with you? You are very red. Do you have a fever? Broly said, putting his hand on Bulma's forehead, bringing his face close to hers. That made Bulma petrify, since he didn't expect that surprise attack at all, a surprise attack that made his mind collapse and his face light up like never before. Actually, Bulma stammered, which couldn't take his eyes off Broly's eyes, especially his third, and his seductive but masculine lips adorned with a perfect denture, which were getting closer to her. But as usually happens in all anime, and this was an anime world, someone must interrupt in the most interesting part. Bulma, Rashi-sama, I have already found Yamcha, Ten and Chaos. We will go to Kami-sama's palace for training. I have come to return the radar to you and... Oh. Is she Bulma's sister? Nice to meet you, my name is Krillin, Krillin said, who returned to the Kame house after finding the other Z warriors that Akira Toriyama would bury in a pit from now. Good interruption, Krillin, just at the right time, sarcasm. Well. At least now Bulma will be able to think better about his answer without shame or precipitation, thought the calculator Broly once more. Hi Krillin, I'm Tights, nice to meet you. Well. Bulma, Broly, I think I'm catching you in the middle of something important. See you when you have more time, and don't forget to call me for the wedding, Tights said suspiciously, since she was able to see the atmosphere that had been created between Bulma and Broly, especially she noticed it because Bulma's bad disguised expressions. Nia-san, what are you saying? We just met today. What the hell is wrong with you? Besides, technically, I'm still in a... Bulma yelled angrily and red like a tomato while her sister forcefully disconnected. And with that disconnection everyone looked at Bulma, who had lost her composure in a comical and adorable way, making everyone but Broly confused by the reaction of what they understood was a joke of her sister. Have I missed something? Said Krillin, who was confused by the few moments of the video conference he had seen and heard. Nothing. Is nothing. Nothing at all. Bulma replied in a panic, trying to hide and deny what was really happening. And Krillin, who wasn't an idiot for things like this, like Goku and other dense shonen characters. He correctly suspected that she was beginning to feel something for Broly, even though she was still technically in a relationship with Yamcha, a fragile relationship that had been broken several times and that wouldn't last long. But that hadn't officially ended yet. And Krillin knew it. So he asked with an obvious suspicious face, "Are you sure?" "I didn't think that is nothing. I think that you..." "Pananam." "I said it's nothing." Bulma shouted as she pounded wildly on Krillin's unprotected bald spot. Clash. And due to the blow, Krillin shot out at the still unconscious mutant Rashi, hitting their bald spots as if they were billiard balls. H. "Ah, my head," shouted Krillin and Rashi, who had woken up by the blow. It is true that Scions are attracted to women with strong personality. This act of violence and domination, sublime, Broly thought, laughing at one of the typical gags inside Dragon Ball. "What did you say when you arrived, Krillin?" Bulma asked, making it clear to Krillin that he must answer about that, and only that. Yes. I came to say that I have already found everyone and that we will go to the Kami-sama Palace to train for a few months. We will all go immediately, so I came to say goodbye too," said Krillin, saying goodbye to his master mutant Rashi. "Hey! So fast?" Mutant Rashi asked, surprised by the proactivity of his disciple, Kami, and the others. "Yes, we have to go as soon as possible. Especially if there are 5 monsters coming to kill us. Goku is training in the other world right now and both Gohan and Piccolo are also being trained. We can't stand idly by. Besides, I don't want to be left behind," Krillin said, expressing his reasons for hurrying and increasing his power. "I understand, take advantage of the opportunity, Krillin, not everyone has the privilege of being trained by the same Kami. I'm even a little envious of all of you," Mutant Rashi in a venerable way while saying goodbye to his other official student. Students who would train under the tutelage of another teacher to save the world while he would scratch his belly at home out of danger. "And why aren't you going to train too?" asked Broly, who had been suspiciously silent until now. Mutant Rashi stammered, which was caught by surprise with that question. It's true. Why aren't you going to train too? Aren't you supposed to be the former strongest man in the world and that few years ago you won the martial arts tournament many times?" Bulma asked in a very inquisitorial way. "It's true, why not?" Krillin asked, who thought Mutant Rashi would be a great help in the battle against the Scions. Why? It is not obvious. Because I'm very old. I wouldn't be able to keep up with some young people full of energy like you. Echo. Mutant Rashi said, hunched over, pretending to be a poor old man unable to move well with back and hip problems. Liar, Krillin thought, who remembered how he easily beat him not too many years ago in the tournament, and his health didn't seem to have worsened in the slightest, especially when he's chasing young girls. "Well, if your old age is a problem, I think I have a practical solution," Broly said, approaching Mutant Rashi, touched his shoulder. "Hey! What do you mean?" said Krillin and Bulma, seeing that Broly was about to do something strange again. Solution? What you do, Mutant Rashi asked, who before could finish the question noticed that something strange had happened in his body. He noticed that he had become taller, less hunched over, the parts of his body that hurt before had stopped to hurt and he felt full of energy. It was as if he had rejuvenated. This cannot be true. Mutant Rashi has stopped being an old man on the verge of death. Krillin and Bulma shouted to see that Mutant Rashi had really rejuvenated. He had become youngster between 22 and 26 years old, and that was something that impressed them and scared them equally. And Mutant Rashi, who was able to quickly understand what had happened, ran quickly to the nearest mirror. Yoo-hoo-woo. Yes. I'm young and handsome again. The girls will stand in line to see and flirt with the reborn Great Master Mutant Rashi-sama Jr. Ha 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 ha. One moment, when I was 23 years old, he didn't have a beard. Neither I was bald. Muenten Rashi said, with joy, perversion, and confusion when he saw himself in the mirror. Well, you can shave the beard, and the hair will grow. I guess. Said Broly, moving her eyes from side to side suspiciously. Wait a minute. Broly. What did you just do? Bulma asked with her jaw almost disengaged, since she was having an existential crisis right now. Bulma knew exactly what Broly had done, but still she couldn't help asking him such an obvious question, since it was too shocking to her mind. She could accept that he could teleport because her family had found a way to compress the space. She could accept that he could stop time, since Dr. Omori had achieved that too when she was a little girl. But to return an old man of more than 100 years to his stage of physical fullness with only physical contact. This was something she only imagined with the help of magical objects with the Dragon Balls. A wish she had planned to make in the future. Well, as you can see, I can return youth to people. Another one of my abilities, said Broly, without giving much importance to that supernatural power that everyone wanted to have. And, can you turn everyone you want when you want? Bulma asked with great curiosity, wanting to have more information about that ability for scientifically and personal reasons. She has bit the hook. Women love gifts like jewelry, flowers, travels and some other superficial and trivial stuffs. Stuff that make you earn points as a boyfriend or future boyfriend if you do it in the specific context, with grace. And above all by linking this gift to an emotional stimulus that will make it unique, especially if it lasts over time as proof of the effective relationship between them. And of course I have the most unique, precious, and eternal gift that exists, Broly thought as he followed his conquest guide step by step. Of course, observe. Broly said, touching Bulma in the same way he did with Mutant Rashi, but with more finesse. And as with Mutant Rashi, Bulma also rejuvenated, and although her change wasn't so radical, since Bulma was 28 years old and she rejuvenated until 22 years, it was a fairly noticeable change, especially for her. My skin is smoother and softer. And this is smaller, and this thinner and this smoother. Said Bulma, who kept experimenting and observing the changes in his body with extreme happiness and astonishment in another mirror. This is an improved version of the one I used with Mutant Rashi. This skill not only returns the body to its age of physical fullness, it also prevents it from aging again, losing your physical form even if you don't exercise or gain weight, doesn't matter much you eat. Let's say this gives eternal youth with several improvements, Broly said, explaining another of his immortality related skills. Hey! Don't fuck with me. That means that I will remain that young forever. Shouted Bulma, who fulfilled one of the dreams was all living being, especially women, in a way she didn't expected. That's right, you will remain this young and precious for all eternity, said Broly acting as a real pussy hunter. Oh god, don't make it so difficult for me, Bulma thought, trying not to blush due to the compliment not falling instantly for Broly due to the great gift he had given her. Gift that as Broly had predicted had given him an infinite number of future boyfriend points. Can you tell how many skills like these you have? Krillin asked, who had headaches when he remembered everything that Broly had done so far. About 369 billion and constantly increasing more or less, said Broly answering casually as if this were a normal number of skills. What? More than 369 billion. What kind of monster are you? Shouted Krillin and Mutant Rashi, who couldn't enjoy his newly youth knowing there was someone so OP by his side. And to change the subject of conversation, Broly said. Okay. Now you can train without any problem, right? Mutant Rashi-sama. Broly said, cornering Mutant Rashi argumentatively. Shit. Well. I'm still a little bit. Ish. I guess I could do some exercise to get used to my new body. I. Stop looking at me like that, scary eyes. Said the young Mutant Rashi, who was uncomfortable with the way Krillin and Bulma were looking at him. They didn't look at him because of his new appearance, but because it seemed he was trying to escape with another excuse. Well, okay, let's go, Mutant Rashi-sama, the others aren't going to believe this when they see you. Said Krillin, who couldn't get used to seeing how his old teacher looked as young as he is. Yes. I'm coming. All of you don't let me get used to my new body. I wanted to go to the city to meet hot girls. These young people, you're always in a hurry. Mutant Rashi said, since he didn't remember that now he was young too. And while Krillin and Mutant Rashi went out the door and Bulma was still looking at herself in the mirror doing sexy postures to admire the changes in her body, flattering herself in each change of posture. The evil Broly thought to himself. And with this I made that one of the best Dragon Ball characters be active again in Dragon Ball Z, not just as a comic element. And above all, with him and everyone else outside for a few months, Bulma and I will have many opportunities to be alone, wawawahaha. And after a few minutes in which Bulma returned from his personal world to reality. Where are Mutant Rashi and Krillin? Asked Bulma, who after being trapped in her own world for a while hadn't heard that they had left. They left a few minutes ago, and in that time I prepared a few more sweets. Do you want some? Eat whatever you want, you're not going to get fat anymore, Broly said, handing another piece of cake to Bulma's directly in her mouth without being able to answer him. And Bulma, after blushing for this male lead action of a manga shoujo, said, delicious, and moments later she realized something that made her nervous again. Does that mean we are alone? Yes, if we don't count Yumagame, which is sleeping right now, this island is just ours right now, said Broly, winking his eye and answering Bulma, as if they were husband and wife and at home there was only their little son, who had gone to sleep. Although in this case this baby is a turtle and Broly had put him to sleep with another of his abilities for this purpose. And upon hearing those words, Bulma's heart began to pound and she panicked. This situation cannot be happening. Everything is developing too fast. It's not a good idea to be alone right now. But he is exactly my type, his attitude is incredible, everything he cooks is delicious and has given me the greatest gift I could ask for. But I'm not ready for this right now. But if he insists, I don't know what could happen. But Bulma thought, having a mental chaos in which reason, hormones and heart fought each other without a clear winner. And in that moment, Pipipipi. An alarm rang in Broly's pants. It came from his phone since someone had sent him a message, which he checked and with a moderately serious face told Bulma, "Oops. I'm sorry, but it seems that something has happened and I needed to solve it. I'm afraid I'll have to go for now." Bulma said unconsciously, since her mental chaos ceased in a way she never expected, leaving inside a strange combination of relief, disappointment, anticipation, shame and doubts. "I'm sorry, but it's something urgent that will keep me busy the rest of the day. But tomorrow I will be free, in case you want to see each other," Broly said, apologizing to Bulma in a cool way. "Yes, of course," Bulma replied, who didn't even think about the answer. "Here, I have also prepared for your father, mother. Do you need me to give you a ride home? You just have to tell me and I can teleport you," Broly said, delivering a bag full of desserts he had prepared. "Thanks, but is not necessary. It will be good for me to drive for a while to clear my thoughts. Today a lot of things have happened," Bulma said, which really needed time to reorder her ideas. "Okay, what time do you want to meet tomorrow?" Broly asked casually. How about 11:30 in this same place?" Bulma answered casually. "Perfect then, see you tomorrow," Broly said, smiling before disappearing with his teleportation. And Bulma, after keeping quiet and silent looking at the place where Broly disappeared for a few seconds, headed for his flying vehicle and embarked on his journey and her familiar house. And minutes later, with her vehicle running, she alone as if nothing happened before in the middle of the ocean. "Please react, Bulma. A million things just happened today. The death of your best friend. The imminent invasion of dangerous aliens. And you're only thinking in having a date with the most awesome guy you've ever seen, to be fair. Oh god, without thinking we have arranged a date with an alien guy I meet only today. And technically I'm still dating Yamcha. Oh god, what will Broly think of me when he finds out? Realize that she has Broly and not Yamcha. Calm down. You are no longer a teenager with altered hormones, you are a woman made and right, although rejuvenated forever. Hi. Well, this has only been a sudden and unexpected crush that has been out of control due to the dangerous situation that I have been through, the Science Invaders, in which he has practically become our savior, and well, that he's impressive in too many aspects. But today you will refresh your mind and tomorrow you will be the same great Bulma that you have always been." Bulma shouted, speaking to herself to blow off steam and self-suggest his future behavior, sign she didn't want to act like a teenager in front her favorite pop star of the moment. Desire Realm. In Broly's private movie theater. Ha 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 ha. Well said, Bulma, I'm glad you cooled your mind. I would have been disappointed that you had continued to react like the typical anime cliché girl who wets her panties before the first Kirito who does something. Kaish. I have compared myself minimally with Kirito and Bulma with one of the twerps who fall in love with him instantly without a logical reason. That's disgusting. Broly said as he watched how Bulma yelled in her vehicle. I don't understand what the point is in all this. Why did you call yourself to avoid such a favorable situation? I thought we were about to watch an adult movie. What a disappointment, said Ichiryu, quite disappointed. Now I can understand why you've been single all your life despite being the biggest big shot in your world. Although it is tempting. You shouldn't start a relationship in this way if you want it to be lasting or stable. There are high chances that the next day the girl may feel regretful for having escalated the situation so quickly without really knowing if that decision was rational or not, if it is what she really wanted or not, or if it really should be done or not. And all this either immediately or in the future will create doubts and insecurities that may appear unexpectedly at any time. A good relationship, which is what I want, has to be built little by little. If you accelerate too much at the beginning it can become excessively unstable, therefore any insignificance could shake those poor foundations. A good initial crush is very important, but you have to know how to develop it, distribute and make it constant over time so to create a good base and execution. It's like a novel. The beginning is excessively important to attract the attention of the reader, but if you overload the beginning of the history too much with absolutely all the impressive, transcendent and flashy content. As soon as you loosen a bit the narrative rhythm, relationship, since you have given everything you have to offer from the beginning you will make the reader feel disappointed and will consider whether to continue reading or not. It is fine to strain excessively at the initial crush if you only want a single night fucking session or one shot to present to a contest or for a story of few chapters, but not if you want to do something long-lasting. The human being is tolerant and enthusiastic about what was at 30 and progressively rises to 60. But incredibly intolerant and catastrophic with those that were at 90 and progressively goes down to 60. You only need to see the world of sport, where one day you are the best player in the world and the next day you are socially dead and a fucking failure if you have 2 bad games. Time and perseverance cheer you, that's what you need. And I have plenty of time for her to know me better. And I to her, he, Broly said, explaining how you should and shouldn't start a long-term relationship without risks. You could avoid all that if you brainwashed her like almost everyone here, said Madara, who kept thinking that genjutsus are the solution to all problems. For God no. I really like Bulma, and I want a real, healthy, and beautiful relationship. I will not dominate her mind. Beast. Said Broly, who for a change behaved like a pure and noble boy. I don't think what you're doing is something healthy and beautiful, you're behaving like a stalker and a controlling sociopath, Rin said, expressing her thoughts, which were in line with reality. Results, Rin. In love and war, everything is valid, and love is a war, especially when there are enemies stalking the terrain that I want to conquer, Broly said, which changed the channel with his remote control, showing in scenery that could be considered the second house in the planet Earth of Broly. Kami-sama Palace. The same day. Teen Shinhan, Kaios, Krillin, Yamcha, Yajirobe and the rejuvenated mutant Rashi looked at each other as they talked about the impending invasion of the Scions, how excited they were to become stronger with that training, although mostly everyone asked about. But what the hell happened with Master Rashi? Everyone shouted except Krillin and mutant Roshi himself when they saw that mutant Rashi had rejuvenated. He. I owe it all to eat well, sleep well and do some exercise, mutant Rashi said, joking as usual. Seriously? Kaios shouted, who almost believed it. Don't lie about that, or they will believe it. It was that strange scion named Broly that I had talked about before. He has too many abilities, too impossible to believe. Krillin said, explaining the truth, showing fascination, concern, relief and envy for Broly and his skills. Wow, that Broly is awesome. And that worries me a little. What happens if he betrays us? Said Ten Shinhan, showing the concern that caused him to have an unknown, unstable and uncontrollable variable on his side. I don't agree, Ten. Having someone with such strange and OP powers on our side makes me worry less about the invasion of the Scions, Yamcha said quite optimistically and relaxed. Are you sure? I think you should be the most worried of all us, Yamcha, said Krillin, referring to the excessive good atmosphere he saw a few moments ago between Bulma and Broly. Why do you say so? Yamcha asked, not understanding what Krillin meant. And not knowing if he should explain it or not, he put gossipy grandmother face and whispered to his ear, you see, it's because. What do you say, Krillin, I don't understand you. Yamcha said, who was unable to hear anything even though Krillin kept talking near his ear. Really? Then I will speak louder, sorry. Krillin said, speaking loudly for all to hear, even though that could publicly humiliate Yamcha. We have never heard anything. Said mutant Rashi, somewhat confused. What's happening? You neither. That's strange. Said Krillin, who didn't understand what was happening, since he is saying and hearing perfectly what he was saying. It won't be that, he thought, having a very bad feeling. But immediately he stopped thinking about it, since from the door of the central palace Kami and Mr. Popo appeared and headed before them. It was a very important moment for the Z Warriors, since they would be trained by the most important person in this world, the same person who created the Dragon Balls and trained Goku. So they stopped thinking about that strange event and greeted him as to a great teacher. Hello everyone, thank you very much for coming, you know what has happened and what will happen in a year. Due to the great danger that threatens to end us, I have gathered all of you, the greatest warriors of this world, to train you and thus have an opportunity to defend all the inhabitants of the earth. Me and Popo will show you everything we know, the rest is in your hands, Kami-sama said solemnly and venerably, as everyone expected the god of this planet would speak and act. Yes, Kami-sama, they all said enthusiastically, except Yajirobe, accepting Kami-sama as a teacher. And after that training, those three who have had the greatest improvement, commitment and dedication will have the incredible opportunity to be trained by the most powerful being born in this universe. Of course I talk about me, said Broly, who appeared between Kami and Popo, leaning on Kami-sama, who had a totally depressed face, but he knew it was inevitable that this would happen. Broly? What are you doing here? Train us? Mutant Rashi, Krillin and Yajirobe Eskedvi surprised when they saw the most enigmatic being of all. And seeing Broly here, Krillin had a hunch. One moment, what happened a few moments ago? Don't you tell me it's his doing. And seeing that Broly looked at him and gave a somewhat macabre smile, Krillin stopped having doubts. Fuck. It has been him. I won't say anything. I promise. I promise. So that's the famous Broly. It's certainly weird and looks strong, said Ten Shinhan, who for some reason, muscles, felt that Broly was more formidable than he had heard. And he has 3 eyes, just like Ten. Chaos said, very surprised to see another person with a 3rd eye on his forehead. It is true. Are you distant cousins or something? Yamcha asked a rather stupid question. Of course not. I have Scion's tail and hair on my head, Broly said, pointing out the obvious. And before this led to a comic conversation full of jokes about bald guys and similarities between other characters, the less unexpected person interrupted that. One moment, what do you mean? Are you going to train some of us too? Mutant Rashi asked both Broly and Kami-sama. That's right. He offered to help us in this situation and proposed that of you 6 he would choose the 3 that best progress in my training to make you more powerful. Although I doubt the truthfulness of his words, said Kami-sama, who felt that he was condemning half of them to an uncertain and more dangerous future than the one they were expecting in 1 year. How bad you are, Kami-sama. I am very good at training and I can even grant powers to those who stand out under my tutelage, Broly said to motivate the 6 Sea Warriors. Motivation that worked, except for one person. Yajirobe, so if I train very hard I will have to train harder afterwards. Thanks for letting me know. If you'll excuse me, I'm going to be training, lying in the shade of that tree. And before Yajirobe could take 2 steps. And of course there will also be a penalty for those not selected by me. I am a great lover of competitiveness as a mean of development and improvement of society, therefore there is a reward and punishment as measures to promote that competitiveness. So those who will not be selected by me, I will leave them bald forever, Broly said with a very serious voice, a voice that showed that he wasn't kidding at all. Yajirobe, Yamcha, Krillin and Chaos shouted, but above all Kami, that could never get rid of Broly and his jokes. Hey! Just a moment. Isn't this a very hard punishment? Shout Krillin, very worried and offended by Broly's punishment. Why do you get so upset, Krillin? Are you not totally bald like me, Chaos and Ten? Asked Mutant Rashi, who now was grateful for not having the hair he demanded a few hours ago. I'm not bald. I just shaved my hair, Krillin said, solving the misunderstanding. And I still have 1 hair left, Chaos said, showing that under his hat there was still a long hair. This is unfair. Half of those here are bald. Yajirobe shouted, indicating that there were people who weren't affected by the punishment. It is true. This is unfair. Yamcha shouted, which, like Yajirobe, appreciated his long hair. Well, you have your point. In that case I will remove all the hairs from the head except one, and it will not grow again until Kami dies. The negotiations are over. I'm leaving, train hard guys, Broly said before disappearing. Off. Chaos sighed in relief upon seeing that the punishment wouldn't affect him either. Fucking bastard. With reason Karen fears you so much. You are a fucking asshole. Yamcha and Yajirobe shouted together. And may I know why must be until my death? What the hell does that mean? That I'm going to die sooner? That I'm going to die later? Fucking bastard. You always do the same. I wish I would die to not see you anymore. Kami shouted, losing his composure, cursing the sky with his fist held high. Kami-sama, please, don't get upset. There are people watching. Mr. Popo said that he was trying to reassure Cammy before the open-mouthed faces of his new 6 disciples. Form realm. In the training room. Pum. Pemum. Fayum. In the training room, 2 people with a tail were fighting each other. The oldest of them was clearly the one who was having the worst time, being repeatedly hit by the little fists of the youngest one. Ya ya YH, shouted Gohan, who beat Raditz professionally from every angle without giving him time to defend himself. Hell, ah. Raditz shouted, which could only stop or avoid 1 in 4 strokes that his nephew threw against him. Jaya. Omega Blaster. Gohan shouted, throwing a sphere of ki that his teacher Broly had taught him to his evil uncle. Bomb. Creating a big explosion and leaving Raditz half dead. Yoo-hoo. That's my boy. Said Broly, very proud that his disciple because he used the technique he taught him to end the fight. Hee, thanks. Gohan said, happy and embarrassed at the same time by the compliment. BS, bastards. Raditz said, who was still alive and cursing with the little energy he had left. And while Broly was the carrot in this situation, Piccolo was the whip. Pyum. Piccolo launched an energy beam towards the half-dead Raditz to finish him off and shouted furiously, erase that smile from your face right now. Once again, you haven't killed that scum. Do you think this is a game? I'm sorry, but killing is wrong. Gohan responded to his strict teacher with the typical moral dilemmas of a good little boy. But Piccolo continued his speech. You still think too much when you are going to attack, you keep making unnecessary movements, you don't take full advantage of your enemy's weaknesses, and you don't know how to anticipate his movements despite having fought against him on several occasions, so it is impossible for you to use an optimal strategy. You have only defeated that monkey because unlike him you have had good teachers who have taught you to use your power efficiently. So don't be so proud. Before you take pride in your little and without meaning achievement, make me proud to be your teacher. Piccolo shouted as a severe, strict and moody, but incredibly good teacher. Yes, Piccolo-san. Mean sensei, Gohan said that despite understanding Piccolo's intentions, it hurt a little that he didn't praise him as Broly. Come on Piccolo, don't be so strict. Haven't you seen how he used my attack perfectly? Broly said as a cool teacher in this pantomime of good, bad police and detained that had been created between them 3. Stop consenting him. Good thing you made me train him too. I was wrong with you, you are softer than Goku, Piccolo said, putting his hand to his head due to the great disappointment and headache that he was being training Gohan together. Ha, come on Piccolo, I could be as or more strict than you, but I don't want to break the beautiful relationship you had in the original Dragon Ball Z, relationship that made you soften so much that you even decided to sacrifice your life to save Gohan and open your heart to him before dying for the first time. And so on, is funnier in this way, Broly said and thought while Piccolo looked at him with murderous intentions. Well kids, it's time to receive your reward. You have passed the first of my exams, complete the following ones and you will receive incredible rewards like the one I am going to give you. Let's start with you Gohan. Broly told Gohan to approach him, and once he approached he put his hand on his head. Here is my blessing as the god of the science, which will eliminate your greatest weakness and also a practical course on how to use its advantages. And when Broly finished speaking Gohan noticed as if something had invaded his body and changed him forever, especially a very important part of him, and he also noticed how in his head there was information about skills he had never learned. Amazing. Broly-sensei, you can do everything. Now I really believe that you're a real god. Gohan shouted, feeling great admiration for his sensei. What? Everything I've done so far didn't seem like enough proof to you. Anyway, we'll talk later. And now to Piccolo. I don't know if I should give you a reward or not, Broly said, pretending he was seriously considering whether or not to give him a reward for some reason. Why not? Shouted Piccolo, who despite not being very interested in rewards he felt cheated by Broly since that prize was rightfully his. Well, it is because of what you told me not long ago. I am seriously considering whether I consent too much to my students or not, and I don't think it is appropriate to give a reward to a student who shows such disrespect towards his teacher. Ha. In your face. Broly said with a very evil, corrupt and mocking face as he makes swallow Piccolo his own words. Jar. You know what? I don't want your stupid present anymore. You can put it inside your stinky asshole. But don't even in dreams expect me to lick your ass as if you're my venerable teacher of boss or something. Have you understood me? Piccolo shouted, who had lost his patience completely. Really? But if I had prepared it expressly for you. It had taken me a lot to do it. I planned to give it to you if you knelt and begged me crying while calling me Broly Senii, with great respect and devotion, Broly said mockingly and forcing the sarcasm to another level as before. Can you tell why you always behave like a bastard with me? I don't think I've done anything to deserve this torture, Piccolo protested with all the right in the world. I'm sorry. You look so much like Cammy that I can't help it. Broly said, apologizing to Piccolo. At the same time he was smiling, thinking about the next joke he could perform. And with that, Piccolo's mental health began to suffer, so much that he almost fainted from anger, and with his hand on his head to try to suppress the pain he said, I don't know how I got to the point of saying this, but I feel sorry for Cammy. And I miss Goku. He was annoying and I born to kill him, but you're worse. Broly-sensei, when I'll be able to see my dad? Gohan asked upon hearing his father's name, and because he remembered the video that Broly showed him time ago in which he was running along a very long and strange road in the other world. Therefore, he believed that Broly would be able to take him there to see him. That will depend on how much you want to stay in this dimension. You know, in this dimension time passes slower, so he hasn't yet been able to train. So we shouldn't interrupt him. After all, you and Piccolo are already stronger than him. Broly said, sending a hint to Gohan. Hint that quickly understood. I understand, we cannot distract him. But despite understanding it, he was still sad to not being able to see him. Oh. Am I indisputably stronger than him? From time to time you know how to say nice things, Piccolo said, proud of himself, and being quite hypocritical considering what he had said to Gohan a few moments ago. Yes, that's why I will have to help him when he reaches his destination, but you will become very arrogant. And I'll also be able to greet an old friend of mine, who will be very happy to see me. Broly said wistfully. North Kai Planet. LA. La 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 la. I am happy cleaning my beautiful Mercedes Maybach 6 Cabriolet. La lolo. North Kai sang while happily cleaning the car that Broly gave him. When suddenly. Wawahahaha. Bubbles, his adorable simian pet, started running in circles. He seemed to be very scared of something. What's up, Bubbles? Has something bad happened? Ah, said North Kai, who in the middle of the sentence felt a very painful vibration in his antennae and his whole body, as if something bad was about to happen. Then Bubbles and North Kai looked at each other with the same scared face. You've also noticed the danger, right? North Kai asked Bubbles. Bubbles answered affirmatively. If you like this content, don't forget to like and subscribe. See you later, bye bye.